multinationals really find themselves having to make a trade-off between two competing pressures. On the one hand, they need to be locally reactive and adaptive to needs of different markets in which they operate around the world. On the other hand, they are under pressure to integrate, to have common approaches, common systems that allow them to be more efficient and have a common managerial way around the world. In the past, companies like IBM would have struck a more integrated balance there. They would have tried to establish their way of doing things in pretty much the same way in all the places in which they operate. Modern multinationals, on the other hand, try to be much more on the locally responsive side of that balance. So that means they do recognize the benefits of global integration, of having common systems, while also emphasizing local excellence, centers for excellence, and local market demands. Forms of global integration in practice can range from things like presenting a unified face to global clients, through to integrated ways of producing goods and services, to global virtual teams that serve particular customers. And to be effective, these common ways of integrating need to be underpinned by common understandings that people within the organization share. And that can range from things like what responsibilities does the company have towards its stakeholders to what is a fair and equitable distribution of work within the firm. So wherever these common understandings are established across borders, to an extent that they actually influence day-to-day practices, we call them global norms. Our research really tried to get inside the black box of how global integration actually occurs. In specific, we wanted to understand how individuals, how people are involved in this process. And the role of individuals has so far really been overlooked, and that's problematic because modern multinationals are increasingly what we might call disaggregated. So they are less hierarchical, they are less top-down driven, they are networked across countries, they are characterized by dynamic global teams, and consequently it's no longer just senior managers, global managers, country managers, or those with a very explicit global remit that are at the forefront of cross-border issues. Now it's a wide range of employees across the organizational hierarchy and across functions that is facing global challenges in their day-to-day work. Our research really found two quite common illustrations of this in companies. The first are project-based teams and the second are shared service centers. So project-based teams tend to cut across the organization. They bring together people from different countries, different functions to work and serve a specific client. And that brings people from very different environments into close contact, and that means they need to figure out how to best work together. And that ranges from very mundane things like how often and at what time should they answer emails to strategic questions like what client deliverables should they prioritize. And sometimes those are specifically addressed and established by managers, but other times they just come about through trial and error. And of course, when a team changes, when it's disbanded, people are assigned to new teams and the process starts all over again. Shared service centers present very similar challenges. They mean that work needs to be handed over between core employees and offshore workers, that they need to come to an agreement on what are timelines that they should deliver to, what is the standard of work that's expected, and related issues. And in both of these scenarios, people that work together need to overcome not only their own preconceived notions of how things should be, but also their cultural assumptions. So creating these global norms and common norms is not straightforward, and it can lead to contestation. The wider variety of people that's involved in global norm making in modern companies means that it's not a tidy or a master plan process. There's many people that are across the organization involved in creating and changing norms all the time, and that means it's an inherently messy process. And these new or adapted norms will inevitably butt up against other norms that exist within the firm. And so that can potentially cause confusion and conflicts. And one example that we came across in our research was a large client expecting to feed back on the performance of team members and actually handpick team members. And that presented a challenge to the company in terms of how can they integrate that feedback from the client into their own performance management system to satisfy the client without throwing their entire internal process into disarray. So organizational norms are constantly being renegotiated within firms, and they need to be continuously updated and fine-tuned. And that, of course, creates potential for unintended consequences. Successful norm making needs to be carefully considered, not only in terms of how new norms are likely to intersect with other existing norms, but also in terms of how codified they are. So on the one hand, we came across cases of very highly codified, very structured and rigid norms that left people very little room for maneuver. And these over-codified norms can often go ignored because people feel that they are too prescriptive or that they don't apply to their specific circumstances. On the other hand, we also found cases where there was a norm vacuum, an absence of clear expectations and understandings. And that absence of clear and actionable rules can also lead to confusion, it can lead to anxiety, and it can lead to inaction. So our research suggests that successful norms, so those that are actively shaping the behavior of people on a day-to-day basis, need to strike the right balance between formulating rules and expectations and empowering people to solve problems their own way. We also found that how well norms are accepted in the organization tends to be hinged on where the impetus for that change comes from. External reasons tend to result in smoother norming processes than internal ones. So when a new norm comes about due to a regulatory change, an explicit client demand, or competitive pressure, it tends to be quite easily accepted. People see it as inevitable and as necessary to keep up in a competitive marketplace. On the other hand, when it's for internal reasons, because of a reorganization, for cost-saving reasons, it tends to be more problematic because people find that or perceive it as a managerial whim, a hobby horse, or people jockeying for position within the firm. And so that increases the chance that people actively resist that change or that they adopt it only symbolically. So how norms are justified, how they're framed, is actually a very important part of ensuring that norming proceeds in a smooth fashion.